What's up, y'all? It's your boy, AJ the Black World Traveler. And today, I want to talk about the slave trade, my belief in the slave trade, and the reason why I started traveling when I got in the military, because I got an awakening when I was younger. I never believed in the way they explained it to us. I know that it really happened, but the way that they broke it down to us never made any sense to me. So when I became an adult, I told myself that I would actually keep traveling to learn. And that's the reason why I started going to Central and South America, because even when black people meet somebody, when black people in America meet somebody from like the Caribbean or like South and Central America and they're black, they'd be like, oh, he ain't black, oh, he think he this because he's speaking Spanish. No, we're the same people, just speaking a different language because of who we were conquered by. So my experience is that when I came as a kid, you know, being black in America, being a kid, you know, being a kid that always had questions. You know, I questioned anything that I was given, authority, whatever. If someone was teaching me something, I always questioned it. I want to know the difference. I want to know the truth. So I was never sold on the thing of us being, you know, black and you know, being, you know, people that were on slave ships, and I was never sold on that. And I always asked God to show me, because I wanted to know. I really want to know who I am as a man and who we are as a race of people, and know our history. Not history, know our story, not his story, but our story. I don't want to run, I don't want to keep hearing about his story. That's why we're confused. That's why a lot of us don't know who we are, because when you hear the word his story, that's history, his story. And that's what the school system did.
Yeah, I think about the teachers. A lot of the teachers had hand trouble.
Hand trouble?
Yeah.
What's hand trouble?
I mean, you know, they used to take the kids and hit them, punch them around. But see, the teacher that I was had for sharp, he used to do it to us. Take us, punch us all over the class.
Was that because you were fairly wild and you had to do that, or?
He didn't have to, because he ain't had no, you know, they not supposed to be punching on people.
You gotta realize, man, before we were going to universities and we were going to these schools, the average black person didn't have over like, what, 6th, 7th grade education. Once we learned how to read and write, we pretty much, you know, mothers was learning, like young girls were learning how to, you know, be mothers and cook and all that stuff at age. Young men were learning how to farm and build houses at young ages, because that's how man developed. There were you couldn't call no contractor to build your house. You had to build your house. You had to make your outhouse. You had to do this. Is like only 100-something years ago. Let's be right. Let's be real about it, man. Around 100-something years ago, bro, there wasn't no contractors building houses. The man had to go out there and build his own house. You had to build your stuff. You had to make your own well. You had to get your own well water. There was no thing about buying bottled water. Going to get ice 100 years ago. You know, going to the doctor, that wasn't a thing. You had to do it all in the garden. You had to grow your herbs in the garden, and how you survived off your food. You had to hunt. You had to do everything to take care of yourself. So what happened to me is that when I was 18 years old, I ended up going to the Navy, right? And I was really trying to learn, you know, more about being black. I always was interested about knowing more about black culture, because I was never sold on us being just from Africa and just came over on these slave ships, and millions of us came over, and it never made any sense. So when I joined the Navy, this is when I started getting my answers. I was in Japan for 2 years. I was in the Navy for 4 years, and my first 2 years in Japan, I was stationed in Japan. I remember, in my first 2 years in the Navy, I was stationed in Japan, so I ended up getting stationed in Japan. My first 4 months when I was there, we were in Japan. We left there, we had to go to the Gulf, so we left Japan, we ended up going to Okinawa, we ended up going to the Philippines, then we went to Saudi Arabia, dropped the Marines off, went to Bahrain, then we got dismissed from there, we went to Thailand, went to Singapore, back to the Philippines, back to Okinawa, and then back to mainland Japan. Within 4 months of me being there, I kept meeting black people in Asia. When I hit the Philippines, I thought all Filipinos was, you know, bright skin, slanted eyes, straight hair. No. I met Afro-Filipinos. I thought these girls had American fathers. And they were like, no, I'm Filipino, I'm from here. Like, so I was so intrigued by seeing that they were Afro-Filipinos. I was like, I didn't really do the research at the time, but I was amazed how many dark-skinned and brown-skinned, curly head, nappy and curly head Filipinos I was meeting. But when you talk to them, you found out they didn't have American dads. They were actually from the country. They were really Filipino people that looked like me, you and I. And I was blown away. I mean, I met a couple women. I was like, you're black. Like, oh, I'm Filipino. But I'm like, you look like people back home. They look like us, you know. A lot of them, all of them didn't have slanted eyes. A lot of them had round eyes. But I know, then I found out, then I looked at the history about how the Chinese did come, and they kind of came in, and they came in certain parts of the Philippines, and they were there for a while. And that's why you see more Filipinos with more Asian features because of, you know, them coming over. But, you know, when you're in the Philippines, you see a lot of dark-skinned Filipinos. And then when I was in Thailand, same thing. In Thailand and Filipino, the landscaping was very similar. The difference between Philippines and Thailand, Philippines had more of a Catholic background, to where Thai people have more of you have a lot more Buddhists. In Japan, like in mainland Japan and like Korea, you had a lot of Buddhists, especially in Southeast Asia. A lot of Southeast Asian countries, a lot of people were Buddhists, like Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore. Like Singapore, you had a lot of Hindus and Buddhists because you had a lot of East Indians living there. But see, in Asia, East Indians are considered black. They're dark. They're considered black. So those 2 years over there, I spent time over there. But something hit me one day. I was on a ship one day, and I was in the back of the ship because I used to do the lookouts. I used to be the lookout. I used to do a part starboard, you know, lookout, rear lookout. I was on the ear of the ship one day, and I was thinking, like, how in the hell did they bring slaves over here? And then it started dawning on me, like, there was no way that they were able to bring the amount of people they brought over, and that's why I can see why they said they had to throw people over, because they died, because they didn't make it through passage. So I started thinking about how our lives on the ship functioned. Well, on the ship, when we get up in the morning on the Navy ship, we would get up in the morning. We had 4 running water bathrooms, like a house, toilet, sink. You can go to the bathroom in the morning. Then you go to your, back to your berthing, that's where you lived at. We had lockers. You go in and take a shower. You go to the mess hall upstairs, where we had a full kitchen, where we had stoves and ovens, and you can get you a meal, your breakfast. You get your, you work all day, you get your lunch, you get your dinner. We had a full living quarters. We had a medical facility where you could go get checked on if you had any problems going on with your medical. You can go to the hospital on the ship. You can go to the dentist on the ship. You can go, you can get your hair cut on the ship. You can go buy stuff in the store. We had everything on the ship. Now we're talking about modernized ship of what, 1990s? So I started saying, man, so something hit me. It's like, well, how would they, if we're living like this on the ship now, you're talking about 500 years ago. These ships have engines now. We have a whole navigation team. The navigation is where we gotta go. When we come in port, we have they have to contact the people to bring us in port so we can dock up. If we didn't have a port, we anchored out, and then we had boats to come pick us and take us to the land. So I was thinking, like, okay, so if there were slaves coming over in ships to America from Africa, number one, that's a long journey. You're looking around, if you're going from West Africa to, we're talking about Brazil. Because when you look at the history of everything, the history was that they were bringing Africans over, right? Well, when I got out of the military, I started doing more research, and then it started making sense to me. Because then you kept saying, there's a lot of black people in Brazil. There's a high, they're the highest percentage of black people outside of Africa. Well, I started researching it, and it made more sense, because if you look at Brazil and you look at West Africa, it's a straight shot. If you're in West Africa, it's a straight shot. Senegal, all the places on the west coast of Africa and the east coast of the Americas, down in South America was Brazil. It's a straight shot over. So you mean to tell me that out of all these years before Europeans ever came in Americas, that they weren't coming across that water themselves? And then I started finding out how they had sophisticated boats. And then before that, man, you gotta understand, before all this went on, before the land was all connected at one time. So when you look at West Africa, if you took West Africa and cut it, and you took Brazil and cut it, if you cut the east coast of the Americas, not just the United States, east coast of the Americas, the west of Africa, and brought them together, they damn near match up. So when the land split, Africa went this way, well, and then South America went that way. So I was like, there was no way they brought people over from Africa like that by the conditions they say they were in. So I took myself as a slave in the mind, and okay, I'm gonna take myself 500 years back in my brain. So here you are on a modernized ship. You got people that you brought on the ship. Now I lived on the ship. You go underground. I mean, you go to the bottom of the ship. They said they had them in the bottom of the ship now, shackled on their backs. They weren't able to use the bathroom. There was no running water. There were no bathrooms. So you had to go to take a dump. You use it on yourself. Bro, I've been on ships when we hit storms. You're gonna hit storms on the ocean. The storms are so uncomfortable. So you mean to tell me you brought all these people over on these ships? It's a 7-week journey now because they didn't have no engines. They had to do everything by the wind. So you had to bring them to the Brazil, through the Caribbean first, because it was the closest land to bring them over. So when you brought them over, yeah. So where were you getting your food from? Where were the navigators of the Europeans getting their food from? There's no land between there. So most of them, if they didn't have food supply, you think they didn't like they had Kentucky Fried Chicken and bread where they could just eat. You got a 7-week mission to go 2,000 miles because you don't have an engine. And you saying you was bringing all these African people over here. No, you weren't doing that. There's no way. There's no way. And it took them 7 weeks to go 2,000 miles and you had wooden ships. You didn't have steel ships like you do now. And I was on a ship. When you get hit on a storm, let me tell you something. When you get hit by a storm at sea, everybody's sick. Dude, we were all walking around with plastic bags because everybody throwing up because of sea. You hit the storms, bro. We're talking about modernized steel ships with engines and a whole navigation team, and we had toilets and all that. Those slave ships, so-called slave ships, didn't have none of that. And you got them at the bottom of the ship. The worst place to be is in the bottom of the ship. I've been at the bottom of the ship when we had a storm. You don't want to be down there. It's the most sickest place to be. Bro, you got to come to the top and get fresh air, or you won't make it. And I'm talking about a modernized ship from now. So then I said, okay, this don't make any sense. So that's when I knew everything I was thinking about in high school didn't make any sense, because there was no way you were bringing people over. And if you did say you were bringing them over and you had to throw them over because they didn't survive, yeah, I can believe that for sure. Because, bro, if you're not going to do, and you're not feeding, there's no proper nutrition. We're still humans. And these people, these black people that you bring from Africa are coastal people. They're tropical people. They eat off the trees. They're eating everything off the trees, mangoes and all this off the trees. Eating a natural, healthy diet. But you're bringing them over in masses for over 40. Man, I ain't believing that shit. I ain't ever going to believe that. You couldn't do it. People would not survive. People say, well, African people were strong enough. No, they weren't. No human is strong enough to endure that kind of treatment. You would not make it. I'm a person that lived on the ship. This is when I got the awakening. So, fast forward. I travel again. I'm on another ship. We go to the same place, to Asia. This time we go to Australia. My last port visit was Australia. And this one I got my answers. Arrived to Australia, I saw people, all different colors. Then I started seeing Aboriginal indigenous people. Then I started seeing South Africans, because a lot of them came over there when they was having the war. And you see a lot of South Africans, started seeing them come out the woodwork. I met a girl named Gwen. We liked each other, we was all flirty. I got her number, we stayed in contact for years. We just became friends. 6 years later, I'm stressed out on my job. I'm like, she said, hey man, come visit us. Come visit me and my boyfriend. So I fly over to Australia. Go with them. We set up everything. Her boyfriend and his brother are musicians. They play in a band. We're going to this R&B band, an R&B club that night. So we get to the R&B club. Now, mind you, her boyfriend and his brother's white. And the lead singer's white. But they play R&B music. They were really good. I get to the club, and it is all black people. And I'm like, what the hell? They look like me. They look like you. Some look like East Indians, some look like Black Americans. I'm sitting there tripping out because I can relate to them. So now I'm at home because I'm like, yo, I'm in Australia and I'm seeing this, what the hell? So I'm like, when they get done playing, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna come back later. So I'm hanging out. They like, yo, bro, where you from, man? They want to take me with them, so I'm sitting there drinking with them, hanging out with them, playing pool with them. I'm feeling at home because I'm with these black people in Australia, like, yo, this is like home. So I stayed there for the month. I'm going out every day to go to eat the food club. I'm in there eat by myself. The sister come and hey, you want to join us, brother? You want to eat with us? So this girl, who my friend Yasina, it was her sister at the time. Me and Yasina are still friends to this day. Her sister was the first one that came. You want to join us and eat? I've never had nobody black do that. My friend Yasina, her sister came up to me and asked me if I want to join them to eat. Me and Yasina's been friends since 1999. And I was just sitting there like, wow, I ended up eating with him. Me and her stayed in contact. We've been friends the whole time. Met her friend. Then she told me how her indigenous side, because she's black, and they're from the Torres Strait Islands. And then I started learning I started meeting Torres Strait Islanders. So when I ended up my trip, I went back to America, to the US. I was like, yo, y'all gotta, man, this is crazy, bro. I was over there with black people, like, they look like me and you. So I was, I'm moving there. I'm getting the hell out of here. I was kind of like, I need to leave America. So the year 2000, I packed my bags, jumped on a flight, all my suitcases. I moved to Australia. Didn't even know what I was gonna do. When I moved to Australia, my homegirl Simone that I met when I was there, I was working with them. We was gonna work together on music because I did music and she sang and I did music. I made beats and stuff. So I ended up working with this dude, Lancy. Lancy was another dude I was gonna work with, but Lancy kept getting drunk and acting crazy with me. But I was down with Lancy. Lancy was in the broadcasting. He was on the Black Network. Now I'm seeing black people. So then that thing fell apart. I ended up moving in with Simone and Naomi. And then I was working in music at night. Well, they didn't have a lot of female friends. They had a lot of male friends. So all these brothers one night come over. I'm like, damn. That dude look like my cousin. And these are Torres Strait Islander brothers. Now I'm like, these brothers look like people back at home. Other brother look like he from Louisiana. He look like he from Dallas. Now I got these brothers in here that look like me and you. So now we hanging out. They're kind of hesitant at first. And they're like, no, AJ's a homie. My homegirl said, AJ's cool. So we all end up getting cool. So they come over all the time, hang out with me. And I hang out with them. So, bro, they started telling me their story of who their ancestors were. Like all of them had Jamaican ancestry. They were telling me that when the slave ships was coming from Jamaica, bringing them, trying to go to Africa, they came through the Straits because they had to come through the Pacific to go to Africa. They didn't go when they went from the Caribbean. They were coming through the Pacific. And when the slaves would see the ships, they would jump the ship and swim to the shore. And he said, what Combo said, my granddad was a Jamaican. He jumped ship, swam to the shore, and he went to the mountains because the Aboriginals were headhunters back then. And then when they brought Christianity to the island, they stopped headhunting, they came down and made it together. They started living together. And that's how they became who they were. And that made a lot of sense to me. But then I went to Sammy Savage He's a DJ there. Rest in peace, my man. He passed a couple years ago. He's a DJ. Big DJ down there, man. Young guy, really good guy. Went to one of his sister had a birthday party one night. So we go to this birthday party, bro. And I'm like not expecting to see this. So I'm here hanging with them. And so, yeah, man, come to the back with us, bro. I go to the back with the brothers. They start lighting the weed up. They smoking weeds, passing it. I'm not a weed smoker, but I'm like, this is like home. They drinking and smoking weed. What's up, my brother? What's up, man? What's up, my nigga? What's that? Bro, they just like, I'm like, this is tripping me out, because now I feel super comfortable because I'm around black people over in Australia, and they're not freaking. This is who they are. So then that night we had the party. So we had Sammy Savage's sister's party. He DJing. The elder women over here, they made all the food, and they made it all island style. The older brothers are playing dominoes and cards. Now I'm in Australia seeing this, I'm flipping out. And the young men in the back smoking weed and drinking and talking about life and listening to hip hop. Then we ended up leaving that night, going to the club, like 2 or 3 carloads deep. We went and had a good time. All of us hung out, we had a good time, and then I kept meeting other black people. I kept meeting other people from like Papua New Guinea and South Sea Island and Thursday Island and Torres Straits. And then I'm like, then one night we had a discussion about being black and how we're portrayed. And this one, it got really interesting. And they were like, yeah, man, we thought that, you know, all black people back in America, you know, was riding, you know, on rims and chain, you know, and jewelry and, you know, and or gang banging, or, you know, y'all living a life, y'all out here balling out, you know, hard what some of them do, you know. And I said, well, you know what? We don't see y'all on TV. They don't show nobody black. When we hear Australia, we don't even see Aborigines. We don't even see Aboriginal people. We see white people. We never see black people. Even on YouTube, you'll see an African person talking about living black in Australia. Being black. How you mean being black in Australia? You got all these people that's black here. So I would be like confused. Why is an African person is talking about living in Australia as a black person when you got black people who are the original people there? And I lived in the community, bro, so I know. And so they were teaching me. And then I ended up getting married to an Aboriginal woman. She ended up coming to the States. It didn't work out, you know. And she was just, one thing that was disturbing, and that's the reason why when she was acting how she was, I understood why she acted how she was. Because one thing I did see when I was in Australia, I saw a lot of black women fight their men. I'm talking about fist fight their men because the men were considered abusive. So the women automatically stand up. I seen black couples fight. I'm talking about scrap. Then we went to Palm Island. Me and Simone and Naomi went over to Palm Island. There was a music festival they did in Palm Island. Simone's ex-boyfriend was from Palm Island. That's where her son's dad's from. So we go to the Palm Island Festival. And bro, I'd never been on the island. There were no hotels. So everybody that came over, we had to stay in one of the locals' houses. The people on the island opened their homes to us and let us stay in certain rooms. So we stayed at Robert's house, who was Simone's ex-boyfriend. We stayed at his house. And we were there, and then all the other entertainers and other people who entertained, they stayed at other guest houses. Bro, there was like 3 to 4 fights. Probably longer than that, probably 5 to 6 fights every day. Every time you seen the kids running, somebody was fighting. That's what they did, they fought. There weren't no guns, so they fought. Every time you look around, you see the kids run, you know it's a fight. And that was their life, bro. They were fighting. So they had to bring mainland police to police the island while we were on this place. Now I'm sitting there blown away. So when I ended up having my time there and came back to the States, then I started seeing the similarities of Aboriginal Islander people and Black Americans. Then it started really hitting me because people in that region look just like us. They act like us. They move like us. They didn't cook like us because you're dealing with different regions. They got different type of food. they cook more of an Asian style food. Like a lot of them cook, a lot of Pacific Islanders and Melanesian people cook their food in the ground. So like Hawaii, Samoa, Tonga, New Zealand, those all Polynesians, they cook in the ground. Same as the Aboriginals, they cook their food in the ground. And they put banana leaves over. Yeah, so when I left Australia, I came back to the States, and then I really started doing a lot of my research because when I was in Australia, what really brought my attention to is that there used to be the stage, and I was in Cairns, Australia. There used to be a stage in Cairns, and every day a different tribe would come up and do tribal dances. They were like, see, everything has a connection to it. The food, the tribal dance, the outfits. I noticed when every time a tribe came up, like the Papua New Guinea dancers came up one day. It's very similar to like African, like the skull, like the when you see like when they had like the shields and like the masks or whatever, was very similar to African masks and the spears and even some of the outfits. But there's so many different islands in Papua New Guinea, so there's a lot of different traditions. The Aboriginals had their own dance. You know, you had the New Zealanders, the Maoris, to come out and they do their dance. So you had Samoans. It was every day there was a different tribe or a different culture that came up and did their dances. But I noticed the similarities of how they cook their food. So when I came back home, I was like, this was interest me, but I had to come back. I'm like, the visa expired, everything. I really wanted to understand the Black American culture because it woke me up. And then it was like, with them being so similar to us, culture-wise and, like I say, feature-wise, like genetically, we looked a lot alike. Even now, you see a lot of brothers, how my hair is now, how you got the hair like was cut in the back, and you see brothers with their hair braided on top like that and pulled back. They were doing that. They were already doing that hairstyle. So it's amazing how we do that now. But when I was in Australia, living there, a lot of the brothers did their hair. Either they had it braided back, or they had it in locks. Either their hair was locked or braided, but they had it pulled back and they shaved the sides and the back. So you don't just do that by accident. And like, I met one brother here that had this. He was an artist, and his art looked just like Aboriginal art. He didn't even know what it was. I said, "Where's Aboriginal art?" He said, "What's that?" And I showed him. He was like, "What?" Because he said he drew it out of his mind. This is imagination. It was Aboriginal art. The way he drew it was just like Aboriginal art. So I got back. I came back. My ex-wife, we got married here. It didn't work out. She went back. But I started studying more about the Black American history because I said there's something that making no sense to me. And like I said, school never made no sense. And they explained Black history to me. It never made no sense. So when I started understanding how the land was once, when I started understanding geography, I started understanding the evolution of the earth and how the continents, how the continents became continents. When the land split, it started making sense why you can go to other parts of the world and see people that look like you. Because when the land split, the reason why there's all these different names, these continents, because when Europeans came here and started navigating, they started naming places. Like they named Africa. Africa was not the original name. Kebulon was the original name of Africa. That was a tribal name. The United States was Turtle Island. The Americas was Turtle Island. This wasn't no America. America's a Latin name, just like Africa's a Latin name. Like Antarctica, those are all Latin names. And y'all think about this, bro. These places are all named by Latin names. America, Antarctica, what is it? Australia. These are all names by these are European names in English that was given these lands. Asia was a name that was, when all the land was one mass, it was all named Asia. It was all Asia before any European. When it broke up, same like Europe. Same thing. Europe has its, in Spanish, Europa. But I started learning about a lot of stuff, man. I started learning that. So when I started learning about the Black people in America, it started making more sense to me. Cause I went, after going through the slave, after living on the slave, on on the Navy ship and all that, and then learning how the ships were coming over here from Africa and other parts. How black people were navigating. When I went to Australia and I kept meeting all these black people, they were from certain islands in the Pacific. And that's when I was out there, I started learning about I met Solomon Islanders, I met South Sea Islanders, I met Fijian, I met Tongan, I met New Caledonians, I met Vanuatu's, people from Vanuatu. And when you started meeting people from Vanuatu, you started meeting the Melanesian people, they look like black people in America. Yes. And what connects to the Pacific Islands? When you go through the Pacific, you're going right across to the Americas. So when you look at the people from Australia, some of the Aboriginals look like East Indians, some look more like black Americans. From that region all the way to the Americas, when you're going through that area, from Australia to the Americas, you got to go through the Pacific and the Melanesian. And so you're going through the Pacific, you're hitting the Melanesian Islands and the Polynesian Islands. And bro, a lot of us came from those regions, and we look like the people in those regions. And that's when I started getting. When I was there, I was like, they were lying to us, because we were too much. Like even living in the houses with them. We were too much alike, way too much alike. So when I came back, I started learning more about black people in America and how we came here, how the story they gave us didn't make no sense, how they was bringing us up on slave ships. None of that made sense at all. And so it never happened to me. So then I started going deeper into it. When I was a kid, when I heard about the black tribes here, the Choctaw, the Blackfoot, the Wampanoag, the Creeks, those are a lot of the black tribes that were here in the Americas. You know, the Cherokees are all dark-skinned people. The Choctaws, the Blackfoot, the Crow Indian, the Wampanoag. These tribes were all dark-skinned people. And we lived on the coast. And then I found that's how they were capturing black people in slavery. They would catch you on the coast, kidnap you, take you to the south. And that's how they were doing it. They did that all through the Caribbean too. So all these black people were already in these lands. And they tell us that we all came on slave ships. So it's like, that's why I started looking at things different, because it wasn't making any sense to me. But when I went down there, it made sense. Because how do you go to a place in Australia and you see people who look and act and move like you and go all the way across the Pacific, all the way to the Americas on the West Coast, and you see the same thing? Then I found out about the Califians, who were the black people that were on the land already, the Califians. I learned about the Creeks. I learned about the Choctaw. We were all coastal people. We were not mountain people. When you see dark-skinned people, copper people, my complexion, we never lived in the mountains. We always lived on the coast. That's why we were able to be enslaved in these countries, because they would capture you. And they would take you to these places. And this is where it gets tricky at. People don't think about this. So when they capture these black people, and take them to these plantations to work in these plantations. You notice when the slaves, whenever they escaped from the plantation, they knew where to go to. Think about that. They knew where to go to. How do you not? If you were blindfolded, or you were brought on a ship from Africa, and they brought you all the way from Africa, right? And they put you on the land, you wouldn't know that land. And if all you knew was Africa to that land, you wouldn't know how to navigate. So the story never made no sense to me, right? When you ever seen movies of black people escaping from the plantation, they knew where freedom was. You would only know what freedom was if you were already here. They knew how to get to Canada. You know, you go up north, you can go to Canada They knew what the North was. They knew, hey, we can go to this place, they free over here. That's why Harriet Tubman knew that's why she was able to come and free people. She knew we were from here. We were already on this land. If I was an African person that came from Africa, I wouldn't know how to go free nobody. So see how it doesn't make any sense? You have to know the land to escape. It's common sense. You have to know the land to escape. That's when it started making sense to me. Then you started learning about your tribes. When we came up, I came up in the 70s. Everybody, you hear comedians always saying, I got Indian in my family. Yeah, you do. And then you learn about our tribes. You learn about our food. Our food tells everything. Food tells everything. This is when I really got the understanding. When I learned about the food, right? When you look, now the food tells where you're from by what you use, because you use the resources that you flavor your food with. So, soul food, we cook with cornbread, right? Cornbread is a staple in the Americas. This is American food. This is the black American food, cornbread. We use corn to cook our food. We make bread. You go to any parts of Africa or Asia, they don't use corn. They got fufu. It's just flour. A lot of them use fufu. Indians use naan. All these countries, any time you're dealing with a food in the black people's culture in the Americas, it's always the corn bread, or the corn is the center of it. By the way they cook. You go to Mexico, you see any black people in the Mexican, it's always cornbread, fish, because we're island people, always on the coast. We always know how to fish. And when I was all the way to Australia, the first thing the black people do, they go out in the bush, they go fish. So when I was and I went back to America, I started seeing the similarities, and it made sense to me. Black people, we always went fishing. We ate black-eyed peas. You go to the field, pea patch, and you pick peas. They're grown in the Americas. If you did eat meat back then, you had to go hunt your meat. You had to go find a wild pig and hunt the pig down, or hunt the cow down. And you had to, butcher it and put it in the smokehouse. We didn't eat meat every day. You probably ate meat once a week. On special occasions, you go kill a pig or whatever. But we were raised on garden food, greens. Because you had to grow all your food. There was no markets. You had to grow all your food. Greens, yams. All these foods were centered in our culture in North America. Now, when you go to South America, this tripped me out, because this is the reason why I started traveling to South America, because I started seeing about Afro-Latinos. Now, I've already seen the Pacific side, right? And the Asian side of black people. So I wanted to learn more, so I started traveling to South America. Well, when I went to South America, what I learned about South America is that South American food is very similar to food in North America, with black people in North America. So just recently, I went to Panama. I was in Panama. I went to a Colombian restaurant. They had these arepas, it was a cornbread. Same cornbread we make, it was made different. It was thinner and round, but it's same, the cornmeal. And they fry it. Just like hot water cornbread, but it's thin. And that was the same thing we eat. We just make our cornbread thick. We put ours in hot water till it sticks, and we cook it. The food was similar. The beans and rice taste just like my mother's beans and rice. And this is people, they're from Cartagena, on the coast. The food tastes just like soul food. Now, I don't eat meat, so I didn't eat the meat, but the food was just like the food back home. When I was in Colombia in 2018, girl I met, she used to work in the building I stayed at. And she ordered some Venezuelan food one night. Bro, it's the same food we eat back home. It was the same thing, in the cornbread, the light corn, hot water cornbread. It tastes just like hot water corn, but it's a little thinner. And she had the beans, it tastes just like the beans back home from Louisiana, how my mama don't cook from Louisiana. Tastes the same way. Fish tastes the same way when I did eat fish. But the food was so similar to Northern American black people food in North America, to soul food. So when I was in Colombia, the food was very similar. even then the women look just like. The women look just the same. The men look the same. You see black people in the Pacific, in South America, we look just alike. We just speak two different languages. They speak Spanish because they were conquered by the Spanish. We speak English because we were conquered by the English. That's the only thing that was different. The women were built the same way, still had the curvaceous, pretty faces, pretty skin. Just a lot of women out there weren't really into the weave thing. They more doing their natural hair. I seen girls with afros and, oh man, I fell in love with it, man. They had hair shows down there. It was Afro-Colombians, where they had a whole Afro-Colombian show. It was all Afro-Colombians, man. Then it started making sense to me. You didn't bring all of us over here. Now we talking about South America. I just touched a couple countries. There's black people in Ecuador. There's black people in Mexico. There's black people in Nicaragua. There's black people in Argentina, Chile, all them places, the dark-skinned people that live in them countries. And they're all, oh, they came as slaves. No, they didn't. They did bring some people over as slaves later on when they figured out how to navigate. Because when they started navigating, you gotta realize when Europeans navigated, they didn't come across from Africa straight over. They came through the top parts of Europe, through the Greenlands, and then they came through Canada. And that's how they were able to survive, because they were able to hit ports. That's how they were able to survive when they finally figured out how to come through Asia. When they came through Asia, how they survived? When they started coming through Asia, because they could hit ports. That's how they ended up conquering a lot of them places. That's how they ended up getting Australia. All those countries down in the Pacific, bro, mostly have a Christian influence down, because when they landed there, they befriended the island people, the Samoans, the Tongans, all the Polynesians, all the Melanesians, they befriended them. They ended up bringing their religion down there. That's why most of the places you got Christians. You don't have, and you go especially the Pacific Islands and the Melanesian Islands and the Micronesians, a lot of those don't do traditional, they're not traditional, they're mostly Christian or Catholics, because they brought their religions, and that's how they were able to get the religions down in the Pacific. Just like the Mormons. So when you go through the Pacific, when you're in Australia now, and Australian people, a lot of Aboriginals don't practice Christianity. They just don't. Some do, but a lot of them don't. It's more in the island people, like the Torres Islanders, the Papua New Guineans. I mean, even them, a lot of them don't practice a lot of Christianity. More of them do than a lot of countries, but Aboriginal people in Australia, a lot of them did not follow the Christian religion. They just didn't. A lot of them, as much as they try to break them down and as people, they still stick heavy to their roots. You know, my daughter is Aboriginal. You know, I never really know her like I wanted to know her, because her mother kind of gave me problems. But when I did go there and I did go see her when I was allowed, like I say allowed, because I only would go if they told me I could come, because I wasn't going to come there on no dry run. But she was taught how to live off the land, like she's Aboriginal. She hasn't learned it. I couldn't have taught her that. But what's crazy about it is that region, you're taught to live off the land. You have to learn that. That's a protocol. So when I was learning about that, it made more sense when I came. So every time when I think about it, when I came to America, I started looking deeper into it. And I thought about my mom telling us who we were, and how my great-grandmother told them who we were. My great-grandmother, my mother said my great-grandmother told them who we were. You know, we Choctaw, Blackfoot Indian, Cherokee. You know, our name was Gibson, was a slave master's name. That's the name that we were given. So Gibson is our family name by slave, you know, by affiliation of slavery. Davis and Hawthorne was a Native American name, because that's the name we got for being indigenous. Hawthorne is when you hear names like that, those are the names that was given, that was our family had, because they didn't have last names back then. So I'm telling you, from 100 years ago to 200 years ago, when they did, and then the thing that's so crazy about it, so all my journeys, when I come to America, I start finding about how black people were already here, and it made sense. Like I say, the whole navigation thing, when people, the slaves would escape the plantations. So it's like when you go to the Caribbean, and there was more reason why they took more slaves down to the Caribbean and South America, because that's when they were navigating through the Pacific. So when you go through the Pacific Islands and you see Melanesian people, and then you go down to South America, you see people look just alike. People in the Pacific islands, in the Melanesian islands, all the way to the Americas, we look alike. When you go to Africa, like when black people, we see Africans, sometimes you won't know if they're Americanized, they've been there for a while, you won't know unless they tell you. But then when they get around their family, you'll know it. Because when they get around their family, they move different. When you get around their family, their food is different. See, when you go to South America and Central America and you eat food with black people, you're more comfortable to eat because the food resembles what we eat in the Americas, in North America. When you go to South America and you meet a black person from South America and have their food, you feel a lot more comfortable because the food has very similarities to our food. Now, when you go into the Caribbean, that's where the food gets different. The reason why the food is different in the Caribbean, because you have more of, when they enslaved, when Europe and England enslaved the East Indians, and they brought Chinese over. They brought East Indians over to work in the sugarcane fields. When they brought them from, like in Fiji, for instance, they brought East Indians to Fiji to work sugarcane fields. They had East Indians in Australia. That's why when you out there, you see some Aboriginal that look East Indian. Then you go to the Pacific Islands and you go to Fiji, and you go to all the other islands. The only ones that have a heavy influence of the East Indian when it came to cooking the food were Fiji and like Australia, because that's why they cook with curry, because that's what the East Indians brought. So you go all the way to the Caribbean. What do they mostly eat? Curry. Why? Because of the East Indians being brought over in slavery, and they were enslaved by the Europeans. They brought them over to work on the sugarcane fields, brought them over to work on the railroad, by the Chinese to work on the railroad. That's why when you go to Jamaica, you have more of an Asian, East Indian influence, Trinidad, all those countries. So when you have their food in the Caribbean, the food in the Caribbean is very, very different because they use a lot of curry because of the East Indians. They use different, they use the jackfruit, mangoes. North Americans, we don't know about mangoes. Mangoes don't grow here. You know what I'm saying? That's why we can't relate to mangoes. You know, pineapples don't grow here. They do have some pineapples, we don't, but we're coastal people from the North American, so our food tastes is different because the food that was grown in this land is what we cook with. That's why soul food has its own flavor, its own taste, because we had to cook our food different because of the resource we had. You use what's in the garden, right? So I started learning about indigenous black people. It made sense. My family from Louisiana. Started learning about the Black Indians and the Zulus. So you start learning about the Mardi Gras. The Mardi Gras is just like the Carnival. It's the same thing. It's our version of the Carnival. Because of our Haitian roots that came from Haiti, came over to Louisiana. And then you got the Cajun roots that came from Canada. But our existence of our food, see, Cajun food is from the Canadians that came over. The Arcadians, they came over here a couple hundred years ago. The Creole food is from the blacks and the French mix. When the French got defeated by Haiti, a lot of the people, they were leaving bringing blacks over here to the Americas, but there was already black people on this land. When they got to Louisiana, there was already black people there that already was doing their own thing. That's why you have the mixture of the soul food and the Cajun food, because black people was already in the Americas. And that's why when you go through all the Americas, the reason why black people are always told we don't have a culture, because they told our culture is African. They told us we came from Africa. They told us this shit. Ain't no proof. They ain't got no documents. And then you ask your African friends that's from them countries, when did you hear about the slave trade to America? You know what they're gonna tell you? When I came to America. Yeah, they knew about, Ghana had ports of black people getting sent out from Ghana, but that wouldn't mean they would bring them to the Americas, to North America. They didn't make it that far. Bro, when they figured out how to bring their people over, that's when they started having successful runs of bringing so many black people over to the Americas. That's why when they did try to attempt to bring people over, they kept losing. You can't let people be at sea for 7 weeks and don't feed them. You can't do, you put any human being right now, 7 weeks, and you put them on ship for 7 weeks with no running water, they can't bathe themselves, they can't eat properly, they can't drink clean water. Bro, you try that shit for 7 weeks and see if you survive. Don't sell me on no thing about, you can sell me that you threw people over the line because you lost them. Yeah, you didn't lose them by the millions like you're saying you are though. They be inflating their numbers. And so people who gonna try to get on the channel and try to, oh, I read this book, man, that's a problem. They kept saying the black man won't, you know, you put in the book, he won't read. Then they make the books for you. They tell some fabricated story. So when I traveled and went to Asia and then went over to Australia and then saw what I saw through the Pacific, that was my book right there. So brother, y'all don't believe what I'm saying, go see it yourself. Man, go to Australia, man, it's a lot of history, bro. You go to Australia, you're gonna see people that look like you and act like you. Go to them Pacific Islands, what I'm talking about, go to Fiji. Go to South Sea Island, go to Solomon Island, go see these people. Because when you see Polynesians and Micronesians, they're dark-skinned people too. And the thing is, they came from Asia. But then a lot of the Melanesian people in the islands came from Asia too. A lot of them didn't come from Africa. A lot of them were not slaves. Fijians weren't slaves. South Sea Islanders weren't slaves. They were enslaved when they were in the land, just like they were enslaved here. The Europeans enslaved everybody when they hit the land. And they never did it because they were so powerful to everybody. They just catch one slipping, kidnap you, take you to their plantation. That's how they got it. Aborigines escaped too. They did the same thing. They had the Aborigines working in the field on their own land. They captured Aborigines on their own land and had them working in the fields. And when they escaped because they knew the land. Just like when they was in America. When they captured us, the reason why blacks would escape on the plantation because we knew the land, because we were from here. Been here. Generational, thousands of years before any white man ever came to the Americas, we were already on this land. That's why I won't get a DNA test, because they're not going to give me no DNA test, and then you send me to somebody, you connect me to somebody in Africa that I don't even look like. So you cannot take your blood and trace it all the way back to Africa. It's impossible. It's not even part of science. You can't do that. You can take the skull and identify it to a tribe by the cranial shape, but you can't use phlebotomy and take blood and then say, oh, well, I traced your blood. Dude, you can't do this. It's impossible. It's scientifically incorrect. So when you start saying, well, oh, you know, y'all came from Africa, bro, I ain't sold on that. And I go to a tribe and then they don't look nothing like us. And then you're trying to convince me that this is my tribe that I'm from because you took a DNA of me. No, man, not sold on that, bro. Don't sell me on that. I'm not sold on that. That's the reason why I'm kind of rebellious when it comes to that. Because when you see people here, every time black people say, I'm American, I'm not African American, a lot of black people get mad. Why are you getting mad, bro? It's real. An American don't mean you're not black. We know you're black. You gotta realize, man, we were already on this land, living on this land before anybody else came here. We're not told that because somebody wrote our books for us. Everybody is writing his story for us. That's why we have HBCUs. That's why we had our own, because we couldn't get into certain colleges, we had our own education. But see, black people weren't going to school, we weren't allowed to read and write and all that stuff because that's why the ancestors was telling us who we were. See, we weren't allowed to go to school, but that's when we had the biggest, when we weren't allowed to read and write, that's when we really had an identity of who we were. That's why we didn't have the depression we have now and all the discouragement now, because back then, when we weren't reading and writing, the ancestors were teaching us who we were. Our grandmothers and grandfathers were showing us who we were. we knew our bloodline, we knew our ancestry. When we started going to these schools, when civil rights, we started fighting to go to these white. I want to go to a school and go where I want to go. You want to go to a white school, instead of staying in your black school, have your black people teach you who you were. See, it didn't hurt the white community. It hurt the black community because when we started going to white schools, they wrote our books for us. They wrote what slavery was. They wrote everything we wrote, everything they wrote for us. The reason why slavery, a lot of things got passed through the whole civil rights thing because we had power. We knew how to shut things down because we had somebody leading us. Don't ride the bus. They almost went bankrupt in 3 weeks because black people wouldn't ride the bus. The bus boycott made a significant change in the whole country. But when we integrated, the bad thing about black people, when we integrated, we lost our complete identity. We lost our culture. We have more self-hate. Our black women, I feel sorry for our black women. They're beautiful, but when you start putting these wigs and these lashes and all this fake hair in your head, and now you're getting these, now they're going to get these surgeries, sad, man. And when a black man says something about it, the black woman gets mad about it, but it's true. You were always the most, every time, dude, back in the day, especially in the hood, man, when you, back in the days, man, you go to the ghetto in the 70s and 80s, you seen the prettiest black women in the world. They be having afros, they be having pigtails, they had their hair pressed out, pretty skin. They looked good, they took care of themselves, they smelled good. They never had no body hygiene problem. Girls were cute. And that's why a girl would go from the hood, she'd go to a celebrity party, she'd go around rich men, and they would damn near break their neck to get to her. Because black women took care of themselves back then, man. They loved who they were as black women. And now you see this thing of just the identity thing, man, and it's sad. The woman never had to do all that stuff. When you seen the hookers on the street, they were the ones that put on the lashes, the wigs, the knee-high boots and the cheeks out. Man, you could never get a good girl to do that. Then if a girl came to school with her booty cheeks out, no dude wanted to talk to her. And now that's the norm. That's considered sexy now, having your cheeks out and your breast out. But see, when you don't know who you are, and everybody's telling you who you are, you don't believe, then you lose confidence. Because you're like, well, I don't know who we are, I don't know where we from. And you start seeing it. It seems to men. Men sagging their pants, ass out. This ain't masculine. You're supposed to have your butt out. Every time your man stand up, he got his drawers showing. And it came from the prison system of men who were actually gay, who actually was putting themselves up, they were available. That's how they dressed. And now you got that as a fashion now, where men come up and have their butts out. And that's a fashion now. It's sad, man. You have a great history, great culture. Find yourself, man. Come back to who you are. Don't keep letting somebody tell the story of who you are, man. Been there for a long, long time. A lot of us didn't come here enslaved. A lot of us got enslaved in the country. All through the islands, we got enslaved when Europeans came and captured a lot of us in our own land and put us on plantations. And a lot of us had to escape off the plantations and go back to where we were from. So, if you like my content, please subscribe, share. It's your boy, the Black World Traveler.